Welcome, everyone, to Cooper Union and this momentous launch of a masterpiece, of the latest book of Juan Gonzalez, written together with Joseph Torres, called News for All the People, the epic story of race and the American media. No one could be more excited about this tonight than I am, and maybe, Joe and Juan's parents and families. But as Bill Moyer said, we have needed this book for a very long time. This book that is a sweeping narrative history of American news media that puts race at the center of the story. And to be here at Cooper Union, a university, a college for all the people that is still tuition-free. And to be here on the stage at this podium where President Abraham Lincoln spoke, where the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass spoke, who was one of the heroes in Juan and Joe's book. Yes, the greatest abolitionist of all time, but Frederick Douglass was also an editor, a publisher, a writer. And when he came north, escaping slavery in eastern Maryland at Mount Misery in St. Michael's, Maryland, he took refuge not far from here on Lispenard Street in an old brick house that was the printing press of David Ruggles, born a free black man in Connecticut. David Ruggles and Frederick Douglass saw information as power, media as their form of liberation. That's why media is so important. And so to be here also tonight on this 15th anniversary of Democracy Now!, which thank you. I'm Amy Goodman, and co-hosting for 15 years, it is my privilege to sit beside Juan Gonzalez. We'll talk. I'll talk more about that introducing Juan, but what is so thrilling as they launch this book tour that will take them across the country is they are bringing back a story of heroes and also of villains in the publishing industry, of villains and great writers who we have not heard about in one place, under one cover, until Juan and Joe, after 7 years of deep research and even more than that, the wisdom of their life experience, have now published News for All the People, the epic story of race in the American media. And I hope everyone gets a copy and gets another copy to give to a library, a high school, a college library, a prison library, a community center. Everyone on C-SPAN orders that book, and we welcome C-SPAN as well as Democracy Now! To this wonderful evening. Juan and I began Democracy Now! 15 years ago on a few dozen community radio stations, now broadcasting on close to 1,000 public radio and television stations in the United States and around the world. For this very reason, to bring out the stories of people who did such great things in history that we don't hear about now. And for the people that are doing those things right now in New York City and all over the world, their voices deserve to be heard as well, and to have the debates and discussions about the most important issues of the day with a microphone that is open for all. Special thanks to Cooper Union, to Verso Press for publishing this book, and to our co-sponsor tonight, Free Press. Which brings me to Craig Aaron, who is the CEO and president of Free Press.
All right, New York City, how are you? I'm Craig Aaron, I'm the president of Free Press. Want to get a little sense of our audience here. How many Free Press activists and members do we have with us tonight? All right, a couple. Now, how about Democracy Now! Listeners? Now, if you didn't cheer both times, that means we still have a little bit of work to do. Because if I took anything away from this fantastic and eye-opening book that we're here to celebrate tonight, it's that when journalists and activists work together, change is possible. When independent media makers are paying attention to policymakers, the media system can be transformed. Of course, when we're not working together, when we're not keeping an eye on those decision makers, things can go very, very wrong. And that's part of this story as well. You see, for too long, we have been taught that the media is just something that happens to us. We've been taught that our media system is inevitable, even natural, and that's simply not true. The media system we have, good and bad, is the result of political choices, of business decisions, and of often complex policies that have been made for too long in our name, but without our consent. We started Free Press 8 years ago because we believe that real change on any issue that matters is going to be impossible without better media. We believe that the only way to get better media is through better media policy. And the only way that that's going to happen is by engaging and mobilizing the public at critical junctures like the one we're at right now. The decisions we make in the next few years are going to determine whether we have quality journalism, whether the internet actually meets its potential, and I believe whether our democracy continues to prosper. That's why I hope if you do nothing else tonight, you'll take one small step, add your name to one of these little cards that I know you got when you came in, and sign our Change the Media, Change the World petition. If you drop those off at our table before you leave, we'll make sure they get in the right places. I promise we won't sell your names. People are going to try to tell you that, signing a petition doesn't matter. I can't tell you how many times, down in Washington, D.C., where I come from, some congressional staffer has called me up and, all these petitions you're sending me, they're not really making a difference. And I'm always like, well, before we sent those petitions, you never called me. So there's the difference. People are going to tell you that those Facebook posts, those tweets, your blogs, they're going to tell you that they don't matter, but that's because they hope you will stop writing about them. They're going to tell you that taking to the streets doesn't matter either. They're going to complain about how you lack a clear message. With the thousands of people on the streets here in New York and city after city saying there is too much power in the hands of corporations, saying there is too much corruption in Washington, too many people figuring out that the media is increasingly complicit in the demise of our democracy, well, I think the message is pretty clear. I think it's just that they don't want more people to hear it. It's so much easier to feign concern about noise and sanitation and littering. It's far more simple to just complain that saying that things at these protests like Occupy Wall Street are just too disorganized. And I think that's just because they're hoping it will stay that way. I mean, they're going to try to tell you that Democracy Now! Doesn't matter either. But it was Democracy Now! That showed what was really happening in Egypt. It was Democracy Now! Bearing witness when the state of Georgia killed Troy Davis. It is Democracy Now! Covering the protests as we speak. And there's not a single show that has devoted more time to covering the media as a political issue. And that has not only explained the debates in Congress, but has featured the grassroots activists who are speaking out in their communities. I'm very honored to share the stage with Juan Gonzalez, who is truly one of America's great journalists. When I was a young journalist in Chicago, I had the pleasure of editing Juan's columns for a while, though in my case, edit mostly meant just calling him and begging him to write more. And to bring us those stories of places like Vieques and even the Bronx, stories that no one else was telling. But most of all, I'm proud to be here tonight to introduce to you my friend and my colleague, Joe Torres. Joe grew up right here in New York. He started his career as a journalist here on Staten Island, and he later came to Washington to cover everything from the White House to the artist at that time anyway, formerly known as Prince. Somewhere along the way, he had an awakening